Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of our Back in Business podcast. With me now, I have Stephen Weisglass, as always.
Hiya, how are we doing?
We're doing all right, aren't we? I think just about battling on through. I've had a week off on holiday, so
Did you go anywhere nice?
You know exactly where I went.
Well, I might know, but what about the rest of the world?
Had a lovely time in Wales. Climbed Mount Snowdon, which was lovely. So yes, I feel nice and refreshed and ready to get on with it. So been lots of announcements recently with all the COVID stuff going on, but today we have a very, very exciting guest on the show, and let's bring him in.
Yeah.
Hello, Christian.
Hi, Christian.
Hi, Rob. Hi, sir. I feel you're selling me, probably falsely selling me as extremely exciting now.
Oh, well, I'm not saying you're exciting, but it's an exciting guest for us. So for anyone who doesn't know, Christian is the MP in Bury South. And how long have you been in that role now for?
Since December, so what, 10 months now?
We're up to a year, not wow.
I bet you weren't expecting this in your first few months of being an MP in this area.
I've double-checked the small print, and it definitely wasn't included in what I signed up for.
Well, maybe we should ask Boris the same question. I'm pretty sure this isn't what he signed up for either.
Oh, true.
So, well, I guess to start with, it'd be really good to find out a bit about you and your story, really, and how you ended up in sunny Radcliffe.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go back to when I first got involved in politics. So first started studying politics at A level, not because I had any real interest. It was just a subject my friend did, and I thought it'd be great to be able to go to the pub with him afterwards. And then went to uni, joined the party, and slowly progressed through that way. But decided in the meantime I would try and have an actual career. So I went down to London after graduating. Unfortunately, family circumstances meant I had to move back up north. So I then joined the insurance industry and pretty much stayed there for the majority of the last decade. So some people choose to go into insurance, and some people just happen to it by accident. So I was there for quite a few years, and then was very fortunate enough to be selected to stand last year, and obviously elected in December, and here I am in Westminster right now.
Fantastic. Oh, you're actually in Westminster now?
I am in my Westminster office. In fact, I'm due to speak in a debate in just over an hour.
Oh, wow.
What are you talking about today?
COVID regulations, of all things. So from where we were before, for any new regulation to come in, it actually needs to be voted on. Right. So we're voting on the three-tiered system, along with a few minor other amendments to it. So it will be interesting, because it's going to be the first time I rebel against the government.
Oh, really? Is that the Northwest MPs clubbing together, or is it just you yourself? Is it?
There's a few of us, and I think whilst the three-tier system certainly simplifies restrictions. So if you look for Bolton, for example, up until recently, they had some of the most stringent restrictions in the country. But if they came to Bury or to Chorley or to Wigan, literally all their neighbours, there were different restrictions no matter which direction they went. So I fully welcome trying to simplify the message, but we don't really know much else about it. You don't know what threshold there is to go from tier 1 to tier 2 and tier 2 to tier 3. So we're in the issue where we're potentially the Holiday California, Hotel California stance, where you can go into a new tier and never leave. Certainly, where we are in Radcliffe, we've had these restrictions for 2 months now, and it's not got better.
It's still very confusing though, because now I don't know whether we are. It's now the rule of 6 here, or whether it's back to we're still not allowed people in our houses and mix with other families and that sort. It's all still confusing.
Still not allowed people in your houses, but you are allowed the rule of 6 in your garden now. So typically, just as we're going into late October, November, December, when it's windy, rainy and snowy, that's when we can now have people in our gardens.
It is confusing, and I think that's mainly because they've changed so much. And to be fair, it's fairly understandable given that, you know, it's a very movable feast. No one really knows exactly what's happening or what to expect. But
and what are the real alternatives?
Well, you know, but it's things like yesterday that on the BBC website they put a postcode finder, so you could put your postcode in and it would tell you what the restrictions are there. I put it in and nothing happened, so I don't really know what that meant.
I guess the only restrictions are the two extremes now. You either go back to a second lockdown, which I would hope most people would want to avoid because of the ramifications it has not only on the economy but people's mental health. But then, you know, the other extreme is actually just, you know, use your common sense. There are no restrictions, and almost try to build up for a sense of herd immunity, which I also wouldn't agree with. I think we're going the right way. We've just not quite got it right.
No, and I think it's fair to say this is going to be ongoing for a long period of time now. We had a mental health advocate on a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think anyone can underestimate the impact on people. Stephen and I were actually just discussing it earlier. It does feel a little bit like people are existing from day to day, and that all fun has been sucked out of people's lives through COVID and various restrictions, and it does definitely have an impact, and in fact the effects on people's businesses as well. Yeah. You know, the government has done a good job helping to keep businesses going, but that can't last long term, and unfortunately there are businesses out there that have lost a number of months trade and are still losing trade because of restrictions, and which they will never recover from, potentially never recover from, and ultimately a lot of these businesses will fail because it's a sticking plaster ultimately, and it's almost kicking the can down the road, I think.
It is to some extent, and I think that there's probably two differences. One where it's market driven, and unfortunately the market itself is dictating what happens, and that's certainly the case for the likes of aviation and travel. So obviously, you know, we can't go on holiday because, well, where can you go without having to quarantine? So there are a few changes happening there, but I do think if the government are imposing a restriction, or they're saying essentially to the wedding sector and the events industry, if the government are saying you can't do this, then the government really should be supporting them.
Very, very much so. It's because their business has come to a complete halt.
Yeah, but I mean, to play devil's advocate, I think there's a very small difference between what you would say is an effect of the market and what is government imposed, because ultimately it's all the same thing. We can't travel because of government quarantines, and I mean, we can travel, but I mean, I wouldn't personally, I don't want to get on a plane and go on holiday. It doesn't feel like a holiday to me. And so the leisure industry, restaurants and bars, people aren't going because of COVID, as well as if they're told to shut down. So I think it really is a mixture of both.
It's a balance of the economy, health, and lives. It's how do you?
The big question I have, and again we're chewing the fat here a little bit and going off topic. The big question I have is, and I'm intentionally being flippant, I suppose, but
okay.
There are, I know people who've had it. I know a few people who have had it badly and been in hospital at the beginning, but the vast majority, and I don't know the numbers, the vast majority seem to get it fairly mildly. Stephen, you've had it, haven't you?
I've had it.
I think you've had it as well, Christian, at the beginning, didn't you?
I had it back in March, and it was like the worst case of flu I've ever had, but with the addition of feeling like someone was sat on my chest for 2 weeks. Although I do think I've got long COVID as well, so I can get to almost this time most days, and I'll be honest, you get to a point where you're almost exhausted every single day.
Yes, but at the same time, you know, that you could catch a cold and you could get pneumonia or bronchitis from it, which can have long-term effects. And I just wonder, at the beginning I was very protective and I was very worried about it, and now I just think we do need to get on with life a little bit. And there are vulnerable people out there who need protecting, there's no doubt about it, but the vast majority of us, to some extent, just need to get on with our lives and take the relevant precautions.
But then it's as you say, it's protecting the elderly and the more at risk. And if you've got if you're out working all day and then you go and see your parents or your grandparents, or your kids want to see their grandparents, and they've been in school all day, and then you can't do it because there's a risk of transference of infection.
I think ultimately it still goes back to that question of public health or the economy. And unfortunately, you can't choose both. You can try to strike a balance, but that equilibrium, I don't think we've found it yet. I think whilst the majority of people will have a mild illness, how are you to know if you've got an underlying health condition that you didn't actually know about?
My wife's got,
in their 30s, they've had a heart murmur. And that's only by accident. So I do agree we should maybe reassess some of the restrictions. Certainly when it comes to hospitality, 10 p.m. curfew clearly isn't working. But actually, most people probably will be okay. But just because you're okay doesn't mean you're not then going to work and giving it to a colleague or anything else. And we don't know about. So hands, face, space. Something I'm writing about at the moment is about increasing regulation for hand sanitizer and face masks, so we can make sure that they are as safe as possible. So in any mitigating steps that we're taking, they maximize the impact it can have on the virus. So we can then go to shops and go to the pub and restaurants, say from the knowledge we're taking all the possible precautions that we can do.
But people were generally, well, most people were generally wearing masks and washing their hands and being more careful. Yet we've still now got this second peak. So, I mean, for me, the jury's still out on whether the masks are hugely effective. The medical masks maybe, but most people have just got face coverings, which are a piece of material or whatever it may be. And I'm not entirely convinced that they're actually that effective, but I'm not a scientist, so I've got no idea.
Well, that's the exact point I'm trying to get to it. In that, actually, some people wear it almost as a fashion accessory. I mean, when you're walking around with a Burberry face mask, you've bought it because it's Burberry. I mean, there's a local manufacturer in Middleton whose face masks are actually chemically tested to a point where they can prove it kills the virus, and it's there, and then they're washable for up to at least 10 washes to still be safe. So that's why we need to make sure that it's not just a face covering or something you've made at home from. Well, I think at some point people were making them out of bras, but basically just to do what we can to make sure everything is as safe as possible, so we can get on with our lives.
Yeah, no, I think that's the right thing to do. It's difficult. It's not going anywhere anytime soon, is it? Let's be honest.
No, I mean we're all still holding out hope for a vaccine. But I mean, going back to my chemistry degree, where I actually did drug design and synthesis, you're still talking Q1 next year, Q2 possibly. And that's if things all go to plan. We could still be a year down the line and still working towards it. So there's no guarantee, even by the end of next year, we'll have a vaccine. So we will have to find a longer term solution of living with COVID.
It seems to me logically the best chance is if we can have tests that you get results in sort of 20, 30 seconds, something like that. So that, and before you enter any restaurant or any shop, you have to have taken one of those tests and show that you've taken it within the last hour or whatever it may be, to prove that you haven't got it, and you can go into those shops. It seems it feels that would stop the spread more than anything else. And from what I understand, those sort of tests aren't too far away.
They're not too far away. Certainly the mass deployment of them as well. I think we're talking, it's initially going to be a 20-minute turnaround, which is still a remarkable achievement in comparison to a few days where we are at the moment. But whether it's anything from checking temperatures, which will still show whether you're asymptomatic or not, because you'll be running a slight temperature. That's why when you look at some schools, King David, for example, they were kind of mocked to begin with the sheer amount of money they spent on making themselves COVID safe. And actually they've had one case. When we look at other schools nearby that have actually had dozens and had to send entire year groups home because they're taking temperatures at every 30 seconds, basically at all the doors, and they're taking all measures extremely seriously.
Yeah, it's that balance, isn't it? You're in an unenviable position. I wouldn't like to have to make the decisions that politicians are making at the moment, and for all the criticism that the Conservative Party, and particularly Boris Johnson, are getting. Ultimately, they're doing as good a job as anybody could do, I think, in this under the current circumstances. And the British people have a tendency to find a conspiracy in some way or another at some point, even if that conspiracy doesn't exist.
True, and we're in a very catch-22 position at the moment, where for those who didn't want a lockdown, they're unhappy because we're imposing restrictions. For those who thought we came out too quick, they're unhappy because we came out too. So that kind of small group of people who think we've just struck everything right is dwindling by the day, just because no matter what decision we make, people are going to be unhappy with it.
Well, but in fact, the people who were moaning that we went into the original lockdown too late have been proven wrong, because actually you probably went in at the right time, because you knew that towards the end of lockdown, everybody was just doing their own thing anyway. People got bored of it. People wanted out of it. And I think there's a limit to how long you can lock people down like that. People have got a limited attention span. And
certainly for my own personal safety, as soon as I could go back to London, I would do. I mean, I've got a 2-year-old daughter at home who wasn't able to go to nursery. So the two instances I remember was one with a conference call, where she climbed up my lap, headbutted me in my face. So I'm pouring blood from my face. She's laughing. Everyone's wondering what the hell is going on. And I'm like, sorry. And then I was in a select committee, and she unplugged the router. So by the time I found out what had happened, the meeting had finished. So I went back to London quite quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure. So we've talked about COVID, but we're interested in also hearing about the plans that you've got for your constituency as well. And we're aware of the proposed regeneration scheme in Radcliffe. It'd be good to hear a bit more about all of that if you can.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I genuinely feel for the people of Radcliffe, because I mean, we talk about COVID fatigue. I think the people of Radcliffe have had consultation fatigue. Yeah, it seems almost every year there's been a different kind of conversation and consultation on, well, we're going to do this to regenerate the town. But this feels like the first time there's actually been not only cross-party support for it, but actually funding stumped up by the council to make sure they're going to go ahead with it. So having Deloitte on side, who are kind of renowned for kind of specialising it in high street and town regeneration, that's a big step forward. Between myself, the leader of the council, and everyone else involved, we're actually all singing off the same hymn sheet. Whilst there might be a slight argument here or there, I think we all agree rationalising of car parking, actually focusing on what we can deliver for both a daytime and nighttime economy, actually could do a hell of a lot to actually put Radcliffe back on the map. I mean, I'm trying to do my own part, and it's why I chose to have my office in Radcliffe from day one, essentially. So trying to make sure that there's a clear, visible presence, and actually Radcliffe's being taken seriously actually goes a long way. I do think if we do get the high school that we've been talking about for, again, many years now, that will be step one, because then you've already got your increase in footfall, because you've got the children and their parents pretty much coming through every day. There's talk of the council actually deploying a lot of their staff, right in the middle of Radcliffe. So again, you're increasing footfall. So there are going to need to be places for people to go to the shop, have coffee, have food, etc. So just by the council deploying staff and the school, you've almost kind of solved your issue of regeneration just by putting those two. I mean, I keep on calling it the field of dreams approach. If you build it and they will come, but it's in reverse. You're giving people, so give them something to do. So whether it's having a creche for children or something, or actually making a bit more out of the library, there's a lot of opportunities and promise for the town, and I actually do think that there's a real chance of actually achieving that now.
The good thing about Radcliffe, when you compare it to Whitefield and Prestwich, is it has a proper town centre. Geographically it works. Whitefield and Prestwich have kind of done the best that they can with the areas that they've got, which are, I suppose, the centres, but it's mainly pub and restaurant trade. Whereas I think Radcliffe is slightly different and does have the opportunity to be a proper sort of villagey style town centre that has footfall and people go shopping. I mean, I remember years ago when I first came to Manchester, and you went into Bury Town Centre way before the Rock was built, and frankly, it wasn't the most pleasant shopping experience in the world. But as soon as the Rock's come about, suddenly it's booming, or it seems to be booming now. It's always busy, and I'm not saying you're going to build something on that scale in Radcliffe, but there is definitely potential and opportunity there. And as a local business, we're happy to help and be at the forefront of that, to help get it going.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to get your River Islands or Top Shops or anything like that, but that doesn't mean we're not going to be able to have a thriving independent shopping centre. I mean, I still refuse to call it the Piazza. It's the town square, but there is a lot of promise, and I think the market has done a hell of a lot of good work. It's almost kind of regenerated that small section of a town. We just need to extend it. I mean, in an ideal world, I would like to see Radcliffe become the startup capital for Greater Manchester, where people come because of low business prices to start a shop, start a business, whether it's hot desking or anything. And then, once they kind of become established, they then move on from that and actually, grow within the town. So I see that there's a lot of promise. We just need to make sure we actually deliver this time.
Is the council looking at building that themselves, or is it going to use development partners to operate it?
So they will be looking for some sort of development. I think the idea from the consultation was the two kind of main buildings in the town centre. So the charity furniture shop, and then the block where Pound Bakery, Boots, etc. are.
Yeah.
They're probably the two that need the most amount of redevelopment. I mean, as much as I love a 1960s concrete block, which is not very much at all. Actually, if you change that, I mean, there's a lot of heritage and some beautiful buildings in Redcliffe, and then you look at those two and just think it didn't need to be that way.
No,
if you look where the medical centre is, and then across the road you've got the paper mill, which is the newspaper building, which has just been redeveloped as well. That's making it look nicer in that area.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with the benches and the flags. I think they achieved the square root of nothing. But I think there's a lot that can be done that doesn't necessarily need a lot of effort. Whether it's sprucing up the actual shop fronts, just to make it look appetizing, and we generally can be a town that's on the up.
But there is clearly also a real need for affordable housing, or new build affordable housing in the area as well. There are hundreds of two up, two down terraced houses, which is fine, but they're all aging, and the vast majority, my understanding, is that they're buy to let properties. There needs to be housing development as well, I think, in the area.
And there's a lot of talk, especially at the East Lancs Mill site. But then a lot of it comes down to what the definition of affordable housing is.
Well, quite.
So I think there's argument for more social housing. I think my argument to that is we don't necessarily need more. We just need to have a better control of the stock. Yes. I mean, when you had the late Bob Crow, who was on £175,000 a year but still living in social housing, that wasn't appropriate. So I think if we get a true handle over the current stock, we might not actually need the numbers that people are saying. But completely agree, we do need more affordable, high quality homes, especially for young families who, we all have an aspiration to own our own home and get on the property ladder. And if we can do that in a town like Radcliffe, fantastic. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So I just want to talk about something. So in terms of, I know we've talked about COVID and we've talked about Radcliffe Regeneration, but I appreciate you're probably going around and seeing a lot of local businesses, or you have done over the past 6 months. Many of whom are worried. What sorts of things have you been saying to them? How are you advising businesses at the moment on what they can do? Or, I mean, not advising because you don't give advice, but what sort of discussions have you had with them?
I mean, unfortunately, I've not been around to as many as I would have liked between lockdown and then heightened restrictions. There've been a lot more conversations via Zoom, and I've got to a point where I've probably got Zoom fatigue as well now. If someone suggests another family quiz, I may just scream. But I think a lot of businesses, there's no real one size fits all. I mean, some have been doing really well because of just what they've been selling or what they've turned around to. So especially for our local manufacturers, they've not had to furlough, or if they have, it's minimal members of staff. They're now on a similar level to where they were pre-March, if not higher. So a lot of the requests really have been predominantly from either the retail sector, the hospitality, or especially the events industry. So there's been a lot of what support is out there. So we've been able to kind of signpost to what there is. I think now it's very much what further support is coming, which is much trickier, because whilst there's conversations going on with the likes of Rishi and the business secretary, their conversations are me saying, look, we really need to do more, without any clear result until we get something. So it's very much more of a, am I prepared to lobby for them? Which absolutely I am. So I was with another Radcliffe business on Friday from the events sector. They were literally forced to close in March and are now being told it will be next March at the earliest when they can reopen. But there's no further support packages available to them at the moment. Furlough's drying up. So how do they pay staff when they've had no income for a year? You can't.
And even when March comes, it's not going to be March, because you need the events to then start coming on board, and that's probably a 3-4 month.
Exactly. So you're talking June, July at the earliest for next year.
Suddenly the pot isn't limitless, is it? It's not a bottomless bucket of money that's available to support these businesses, and sadly, there's a limit to, I think, what the government can do. I mean, it's controversial and it's very sad, but there are over the last however many years, 50, 100 years, there are things that happen that impact businesses that are outside of the control of the business owners. Recessions, depressions, and some businesses do have to modify what they're doing and do different things to try and keep going as well. And I think perhaps there needs to be a bit more support for that as well, to do different things. I'm not sure how that works, but that is another option.
And I think we are very much in that awkward position now where we've done most of what we can already. It goes back to the conversation we were having earlier as to we're now at that point where, for those businesses that the government is forcibly closing, we do need to do a bit more, in my view.
Okay. Well, Christian, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I hope your debate goes well and you get the result that you want.
Well, I'm going to literally have to run across there in a mix. I'm due to speak in about 3 or 4 people's time, so always good when I've not finished writing my speech.
All right, we will definitely let you go. Thanks for taking the time out, Christian. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And don't hesitate to knock on when you're around in the area.
Absolutely. Come and have a coffee with us. With pleasure.
More than happy to. We've been a big fan of coffee.
Okay. All the best, Christian. Take care.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
That was interesting.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay. Well, so now we are at the end of this week's podcast.
Yeah, no, that was really good. So
that was very interesting. And anybody who's watching, please provide any comments. Yeah, we'd like to hear from you, to hear what your views on the discussions that we've had today. And please share our podcast, and let's get it going and shared widely. So
comment below.
Comment below. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.
Bye.